and treacherous situation.
Yeah, we got to take a break, but I'll just point out to you what others have pointed out. The North Koreans watched very closely Muammar Gaddafi of Libya give up his nuclear weapons program. Where's Muammar Gaddafi right now? Where is his regime? They don't want to follow in that with that example.
This is CNN Breaking News.
We're following breaking news, disturbing new developments in the standoff with North Korea. Sources are now telling CNN that U.S. intelligence analysts have assessed that North Korea has produced a miniaturized nuclear warhead. Experts say it's only a matter of time before the Kim Jong-un regime can launch a nuclear missile, and the country's foreign minister says its nuclear program is non-negotiable. President Trump responded with a stunning threat, saying the United States will respond with, quote, fire and fury like the world has never seen if North Korea threatens the United States. His national security advisor, General H.R. McMaster, has said a North Korean nuclear weapon capable of hitting the United States is intolerable to the president, and that military options, including launching a preemptive war, are all on the table. Complicating matters for President Trump, a crisis of credibility. A new CNN poll shows 60% of Americans say they don't believe the president is honest and trustworthy. Mr. Trump dismissed the numbers in a tweet, calling them, quote, fake news suppression polls. We're covering all of that, much more this hour, with our guests, including Senator Chris Coons of the Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committees. And our correspondents and specialists are also standing by. But first, let's get straight to the breaking news and its significance. CNN's Brian Todd is working the story for us. Brian, a very ominous new development involving North Korea.
A very disturbing development tonight, Wolf, coming on the heels of CNN's reporting that Kim Jong-un could be just months away from having a nuclear-capable missile that could reach the U.S. Tonight, Kim is threatening to take what his regime calls, quote, physical action to retaliate for new UN sanctions. And he now seems frighteningly close to being able to back that up. Kim Jong-un appears to have ramped up his capability to deliver his deadliest weapons, and tonight is drawing a stern warning from President Trump about threatening the U.S.
As I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
U.S. intelligence officials have assessed that North Korea has produced a miniaturized nuclear warhead that can fit inside its missiles, including its long-range ICBMs that could reach the United States. That's according to multiple sources familiar with the analysis of Kim's missile and nuclear program. Though one source tells CNN this is not a consensus view by the entire intelligence community.
Because of the North Korean progress, Hawaii, Alaska, Washington State, Oregon, California, are all now threatened directly by the progress that UN and the North Koreans have made.
A missile expert explains where that miniaturized warhead would go and how it would work.
Within this nose cone or shroud would be the warhead. That would, goes up into space, separates, comes back down, and a kind of pointed object is going to enter the atmosphere very, very fast.
Sources tell CNN it is not believed the warhead capability has been tested. And there's another key question tonight about the missiles that would deliver it.
It's unclear that that reentry vehicle that would hold the warhead would survive coming back into the atmosphere and reaching the target.
For a warhead to reach its target, it has to re-enter the atmosphere from space at very high speed, so the engineers need to protect it from extreme heat. North Korea has already been testing heat shields that protect the warhead during its fiery re-entry. President Trump's national security advisor, H.R. McMaster, recently said the possibility that North Korea could possess nuclear weapons capable of reaching America would be, quote, intolerable and could lead to a U.S. military response. What could that response be?
One of the options is to use military weapons, precision strike weapons, to take these weapons out, both in their hide sites, the deep underground facilities, as well as they're being mounted to the weapon themselves. These are all throughout North Korea. We do know where a lot of them are.
But that option comes with a warning tonight about how Kim Jong-un could strike back.
Because we have Seoul right on the border within direct artillery range, one of the very likely retaliations would be a launch of weapons, direct artillery weapons against Seoul. The Seoul, for example, is a hostage city.
a densely populated city of more than 10 million people. Also in the target range of Kim and his million-man army, some 28,000 American troops in South Korea. Some estimates project tens of thousands of people killed in the first couple of days of a potential conflict. Wolf.
Brian, what are the latest assessments of how many nuclear bombs North Korea may already have?
Well, according to the Washington Post, Wolf, U.S. officials calculated last month that Kim's got up to 60 nuclear weapons right now. But I spoke a short time ago with David Albright, a respected former UN weapons inspector who tracks this whole thing very closely. He says that number 60 is a worst case estimate. And he says more realistically, North Korea still has about maybe 30 nuclear bombs now, still very, very ominous.
Yeah, 30 or 60, very, very ominous indeed. Brian Todd, thanks very much. Let's dig deeper with our Pentagon correspondent Barbara Starr, our chief national security correspondent Jim Sciutto, and CNN's Will Ripley, who's joining us from Beijing. He's traveled extensively to North Korea. How ominous, Jim Sciutto, is this situation right now?
Well, this threat from the president is certainly extremely unusual. Whether it was intentional or not, we don't know. But these words coming from the president's mouth, in effect, setting a new red line here, saying, the president very explicitly, if North Korea makes another threat, the U.S. will respond with fire and fury. North Korea makes threats all the time. What does that mean? What does it actually mean the U.S. response will be? Does it set this administration up for its own failure to enforce a red line? How does North Korea interpret this threat? Keep in mind that North Korea is a very nervous power. It sees enemies and threats all around it, not just from the West, the U.S., North Korea, South Korea, rather, Japan, even its ally, China. It sees the U.S. moving military resources into the region, submarines, ships, aircraft, etc. Does it take one of those movements as a hostile movement and then feel the need defensively, in its view, to react militarily? There are a lot of things North Korea can do short of launching a nuclear-tipped missile. It could shoot at the U.S. aircraft, at U.S. Ships in the region. And keep in mind, and as you know, Wolf, the president retweeted this report earlier today, which seemed to contain possibly classified information that North Korea was equipping patrol boats with anti-ship missiles, which could be a threat to U.S. ships in the region. Presidential language matters. The words coming from the president's mouth via Twitter or in a comment like this matters, and it's the kind of thing that can cause a reaction from a state like North Korea, which is a very nervous power with lots of various very dangerous weapons in that region, even short of ICBMs and missiles.
You know, it's significant that the president made this statement at an unrelated photo opportunity. He clearly came prepared. He knew reporters were going to ask him for his comments, fire, fury, and frankly, power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
Well, remember, we were talking even just a few days ago, how long has John Kelly been his chief of staff? The interpretation was John Kelly was going to keep the president from tweeting or making comments on the most sensitive issues. It's hard to imagine a more sensitive issue today than North Korea. And these are very, at a minimum, compelling comments, but potentially incendiary comments.
Let me go to Barbara Starr at the Pentagon. And what are your sources over there telling you, Barbara? This sounds extremely dangerous right now.
Well, look, Defense Secretary James Mattis, Secretary of State Rex Tillerson, still, by every measure we see, really hoping for diplomacy to work. There's no indication at this point that the North Koreans are ready for that. But Defense Secretary Mattis for months now has been warning the prospect of war with North Korea would be catastrophic, that the death toll would be enormous, that the North Koreans could quickly retaliate with that very well understood attack on Seoul. So I think we have to see in the coming days where the president's rhetoric really fits into this overall picture. There is a sense, perhaps with some people, that he's trying to match Kim's rhetoric, trying to send that message. But the question is, what message is North Korea actually hearing?
You know, Will Ripley, you've been to North Korea, I think, 13 times over the past few years. What's Kim Jong-un's end game right now?
Well, what he wants is to perfect this ICBM with a miniaturized nuclear warhead that could reliably deliver it to anywhere in the mainland United States, because he feels that once he has that weapon in his arsenal, and this is the sense that I got even as recently as June when I was in North Korea speaking with officials there, once they have this weapon, they feel that they really do have an insurance policy against what they've been telling their citizens for a very long time, for decades, is the imminent threat of invasion by the United States. They told their citizens that America started the Korean War, which goes goes against the views of all outside historians. They tell citizens they have to train and be prepared for the next war. These are even young children who are being told this, that America could attack at any moment. And so therefore, he wants to have a weapon in his arsenal to prevent that, and also to tell his own citizens that he is strong and he is in command, and hopefully perhaps have it as leverage in dealing with the international community, and in particularly the United States.
How's Kim Jong-un will likely to respond to President Trump's threat? He said North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. He warned of fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which the world has never seen before. How's Kim Jong-un likely going to respond to that threat from the president?
There are a number of ways that North Korea will likely respond. They'll certainly put out a very strongly worded statement of their own fiery rhetoric. North Korea has said things like this about the United States, that they'll rain fire down on Washington, that the United States will be annihilated in a nuclear attack. So that kind of rhetoric from North Korea is not unusual, but they've never had a weapon like the one that they have right now. We could also see more missile tests or other acts, other ways to project strength militarily. Perhaps we'll see them fire a missile into the sea. Perhaps we'll see them test another ICBM. And then, of course, we've been saying for months now, intelligence indicates that North Korea is ready to push the button on their 6th nuclear test at some point. It hasn't happened yet. Could this push Kim Jong-un to the point where he decides it's time for that nuclear test? That's what we don't know. And what we also don't know now is how the United States will respond. Because if verbal threats are a red line, then what will the U.S. do if and when there's another major test like the 2 ICBM launches that occurred just last month?
You know, it's interesting, Jim, the threat from the president. North Korea better not make any more threats. You know the North Koreans are going to be threatening a lot.
Right. And do they do that intentionally to in effect, test the president and then call out the U.S. for not responding, right? Sensing weakness there, at least for their own population and elsewhere. I mean, it sets up a whole host of possibilities here. And keep in mind, it's not just North Korea that's nervous. It's U.S. allies in the region, Japan, South Korea. They're talking about arming in ways they haven't armed before because of that threat.
It's an amazing development right now. We're staying on top of everybody. I want to stand by because we're going to continue to follow the breaking news. Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware is joining us. He's a key member of both the Foreign Relations and Judiciary Committees. Senator, first of all, you heard what the president just said. If North Korea continues making more threats, they will be met with what the president describes as fire, fury, and power, the likes of which the world has never seen before. When you heard that, what does that mean to you?
Well, Wolf, I was reminded that as a candidate, President Trump promised that he would be unpredictable and unconventional. And his first 7 months in office have certainly demonstrated that he's kept to that promise. I think this is a very dangerous moment. And it's important for our president not to be unpredictable. It's important for President Trump to tweet less and to coordinate closely with our regional allies, South Korea and Japan, and to carefully calibrate statements, threats, and actions. It's clear that the response from North Korea could impose punishing losses on South Korean civilians, potentially on American troops on the Korean Peninsula. And so I think we need to proceed very carefully. I'll congratulate the Trump administration on having secured a 15-0 vote in the United Nations Security Council last weekend and moving forward with tough sanctions on North Korea. But I think this is a time for us to redouble our diplomatic efforts with China and to make sure that we are coordinating closely with our regional allies to avoid a miscalculation.
But couldn't a statement like the one we just heard from the president actually provoke Kim Jong-un and others in North Korea?
Yes, absolutely. As was just discussed in this segment, North Korea is known for having an isolated leadership. Kim Jong-un is 35 years old. We don't even know his exact birthday. He's only been in control of the country since 2011, and he's given to very bellicose, aggressive rhetoric, and he's now, according to some intelligence reports, managed to marry their recent nuclear developments and ICBM developments with potentially an ICBM capable of delivering a nuclear weapon to the American homeland. This is a very destabilizing development, and I think we need to proceed carefully, and President Trump needs to deliver a clear strategy to the American people and certainly to his partners in Congress so that we can move forward in a way that is measured, thoughtful, and doesn't lead to an unexpected conflict with North Korea.
And you heard that he may have maybe 30 nuclear bombs already, maybe as many as 60, according to that U.S. intelligence estimate that was reported in the Washington Post. What number are you hearing lately, Senator? How many nuclear bombs does Kim Jong-un already have?
Well, I can only repeat to you open source reporting, which, as you've already covered, is somewhere between 24 and 50 or 60. In any event, they certainly have dozens of nuclear warheads, and they've detonated several in recent years. So I don't think we can question whether or not North Korea has nuclear weapons. The question is, can they accurately deliver them? And this makes it an increasingly destabilized Korean peninsula and region. And the likelihood that they could strike the American homeland makes this an extremely dangerous situation, and one where I hope the Trump administration will proceed cautiously.
The Trump administration says all options are on the table, including the military option. But realistically, Senator, is there a good military option on the table?
There is no good military option because North Korea has thousands, I think roughly 8,000 artillery and rocket pieces that are embedded deeply in the hillsides north of Seoul. They could exact punishing revenge on South Korea almost immediately after a first strike by the United States. So there is no good or easy option here. A conflict with North Korea would not be quick and would not be painless. But we do have to measure the very real possibility that North Korea's dictator might directly threaten America's homeland and our civilian population. That's a very high threat level indeed. And I think this is exactly the sort of thing that calls for measured, careful, but decisive American leadership in the region.
The North Korean regime has promised retaliation against the United States. Do you believe Kim Jong-un?
I believe that Kim Jong-un is someone who believes his back is to the wall, who has been raised in a country where they have believed for decades that the United States would like to effect a regime change. And so I think this paranoid, militaristic, and capable young leader is someone whose threats we should take very seriously.
The Secretary of State, Rex Tillerson, over the weekend, he was in Manila, in the Philippines, at this meeting of the Association of Southeast Asian Nations. He pointedly did not meet with the North Korean foreign minister, even though the North Korean foreign minister did meet with the South Korean foreign minister, the Russian foreign minister, a whole bunch of other foreign ministers. Was it a mistake for the U.S. not to meet with him?
Well, I'm not sure exactly how Secretary Tillerson is proceeding on his diplomatic strategy with North Korea. My hope would be that we will later learn there were side meetings and that there are side channels being explored. At the same time that we prepare for a possible military confrontation with North Korea, it's my hope that we're continuing an all-hands diplomatic front in order to push China to take a more decisive role here in pressing the North Korean regime to take down its rhetoric and to step back from further confrontation with South Korea, Japan, and the United States.
Well, do you believe the U.S. should engage in direct talks with North Korea?
I think we should engage in direct talks as long as the possibility of their relinquishing their nuclear weapons ambitions is on the table for negotiation.
But they're not going to do that. You don't really believe they're going to give up their nuclear weapons program. They see that as their insurance policy for survival.
Well, I think they misperceive America's aggressive stance towards them. We've previously made statements that regime change is not our goal. Secretary Tillerson has recently made statements that we don't intend to invade North Korea, that we don't intend to seek regime change in North Korea. So I do think there are things we can discuss, but I also think that we need to be prepared for the worst. We need to recognize that North Korea is an isolated, heavily militarized nation that is paranoid and that sees threats all around it. Even China amping up its pressure against North Korea by joining with the United States and Russia in a UN Security Council imposed sanctions regime has not persuaded them to back off. So, Wolf, this is a very difficult and treacherous situation.
Yeah, we got to take a break, but I'll just point out to you what others have pointed out. The North Koreans watched very closely Muammar Gaddafi of Libya give up his nuclear weapons program. Where's Muammar Gaddafi right now? Where is his regime? They don't want to follow in that with that example. Senator, stay with us. There's much more developing right now in the breaking news. We'll be right back. The breaking news this hour, an extraordinary warning by President Trump to North Korea, which U.S. intelligence now believes has a nuclear weapon capable of fitting on a missile, according to sources. We're back with Democratic Senator Chris Coons of Delaware. He's a member of both the Judiciary and Foreign Relations Committee. Senator, I want you to stand by. I need to go to our White House correspondent, Sarah Murray. She's in New Jersey with the president right now. Sarah, some extraordinarily strong words from the president involving North Korea.
That's right, Wolf, and we know that over the past couple of days, the president has huddled with officials about the situation in North Korea. They have made clear that all options are on the table, including the military option, and the president himself appeared to try to be getting that across today in a very stern warning to North Korea. President Trump issuing a sharp warning today to North Korea.
North Korea best not make any more threats to the United States. They will be met with fire and fury like the world has never seen. He has been very threatening beyond a normal statement. And as I said, they will be met with fire, fury, and frankly power, the likes of which this world has never seen before.
The president saying dire consequences lie ahead if North Korea's nuclear threats continue. The warning coming as the president injects a dash of policy to his New Jersey retreat.
It is horrible what's going on with opioid and other drugs.
Vowing to combat the opioid crisis as Trump faces a credibility crisis of his own. 6 months into his presidency, just 38% of Americans approve of the job Trump is doing. 56% disapprove, according to the latest CNN polls. But it's clear the new president is already facing a credibility gap, with 60% of Americans saying they don't believe Trump is honest and trustworthy. Add to that, only a quarter of Americans say they believe all or most of the official communications from the White House, compared to 30% who say they don't trust anything they hear from the president's office. A series of questionable moves by the administration may only fuel American skepticism. Like this recommendation from Department of Agriculture officials to drop the term climate change and instead refer to weather extremes, according to an email obtained by CNN. The guidance comes under a president who has frequently questioned the scientific consensus behind humans' impact on rising global temperatures. But Trump has also faced scrutiny for his handling of classified information. On Tuesday, he retweeted a Fox News report based on anonymous sources who leaked the information. It declared, U.S. spy satellites detect North Korea moving anti-ship cruise missiles to patrol boat. This is what Nikki Haley, the ambassador to the United Nations, had to say about that issue.
I can't talk about anything that's classified, and if that's in the newspaper, that's a shame.
But the president apparently has no qualms about once again sharing potentially classified information. In July, Trump tweeted about a covert CIA program to arm Syrian rebels. After the Washington Post reported, the administration planned to end it. Sources say Trump also shared highly classified information with Russian officials when he invited them into the Oval Office in May.
It is alarming the casualness with which President Trump shares classified information.
Now, one of the things we have not heard much from President Trump about today is the Russia investigation, but his chief counsel, John Dowd, did a fascinating interview with USA Today in which he reveals that President Trump actually asked him to pass along his appreciation for the work Robert Mueller, the special counsel, is doing in the Russia investigation. Trump's lawyer said he did just that. Obviously, a very different tone going on privately between these two gentlemen than what we've heard from the president publicly. Back to you, Wolf.
Very different tone indeed. Very interesting. Sarah, thanks very much. Sarah Murray in New Jersey for us. Senator Coons, let me ask you, do you think it's appropriate for the president to be passing along these private messages through his legal team to the special counsel, Robert Mueller, as USA Today is now reporting?
That seems an odd choice, Wolf. I really think the best course of action for the president is just stay away from the Russia investigation and Special Counsel Mueller altogether, allow him to conduct his investigation and to reach whatever conclusion the information, the evidence justifies. As I think you know, I introduced a bipartisan bill with Republican Senator Tom Tillis just before we went out for August in order to buttress Special Counsel Mueller and to make sure that a strong bipartisan signal was sent to protect him from any sort of interference by the executive.
Yeah, because your proposal, bipartisan proposal, would prevent Mueller from being fired by the president for all practical purposes. Here's the question, Senator. Have you spoken to your chairman, the Judiciary Committee Chairman, Chuck Grassley, about this? Do you have assurances that your committee will vote on this proposal?
We don't have a commitment yet from the committee chairman. Senator Tillis has reached out to Chairman Grassley. I've heard from Ranking Member Feinstein. She's willing to go ahead and support the bill, and I'm waiting to hear from Senator Tillis about how their conversation went. There's another bill, by the way, that Senators Graham and Booker also introduced right before we left that similarly protects the special counsel. And I think that suggests a widening number of senators interested in this topic and willing to legislate to protect Robert Mueller from any interference.
So you're leaving it to Senator Tillis to deal with the chairman, is that right?
So far, I do intend to reach out to the chairman as well. And given the way that Chairman Grassley has conducted himself in leading the Judiciary Committee in pursuing obstruction of justice and pursuing some of the leads around failure to report for former senior administration officials, I think he is interested in acting to defend this investigation. The Judiciary Committee has jurisdiction over the Department of Justice, and the chairman has acted actively to make sure that the jurisdiction of the committee is protected, and I would expect him to ultimately come to a point of being supportive.
Senator Coons, thanks so much for joining us.
Thank you.
The breaking news continues here. Red-hot rhetoric as the North Korea crisis clearly escalates dramatically today. Is President Trump threatening the use of force? Plus, the credibility crisis plaguing the president and the White House. We have exclusive and surprising new poll numbers.